Welcome to the show. Today we're at the water treatment plant and we're going to sit down and talk to Doug Kaupp.
Thanks for being with us today. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us what your role is in agri-food processing?
My name is Doug Kaupp. I'm the General Manager of Water and Wastewater at the City of Lethbridge. My role is supplying the community with a high-quality drinking water and treating the wastewater from those industries that are processing the food.
So Doug, tell us about agri-food processing in the watershed.
And agri-food processing is a really big part of the economy in this region. Agriculture is by far the biggest part of the economy, but an important role in processing is that it adds value and jobs. So it's not just products going on trains elsewhere to be turned into food for people. That can happen right here close in the region. Agri-food processing is a really water-intensive industry. Not only does it take water to grow the crops, but it takes water to process them. Our largest customers by far are food processors, and they, in many cases, use millions of liters a day to make the products.
So just ballpark, would you say there's more agri-food processing using water or more residential?
In the whole region, the water utility supplies about 130,000 residences in the city and neighboring towns and in the county that really add up to a lot of water use. In the winter time, the food processing would be maybe a third of all the water demand. But in the summer, when there's a lot of outdoor use and lawn watering and parks upwatering going on our peak days, it would represent a much smaller number, half of that. So maybe 15%, 12 or 15% of the water use would go to these large water users. There are, less than a dozen of these big plants, whether they're making French fries, Doritos, or cheese. So there's a large variety, but not a large number. They're big plants that supply hundreds and hundreds of jobs.
Mm-hmm. So do most of the plants use water and then it's like made into a product like whiskey, or is most of it going back into the river after it's used?
The vast majority of them, 90% of the water would come back as wastewater. If you're processing corn or peas or potatoes, then the vast majority of that water is returned as wastewater.
So how are these agri-food businesses becoming more efficient with their water use?
For the most part, many of them have either invested or are investigating means of recycling the water. For applications where the water doesn't have to be as clean as they get it from us, those are opportunities for the water to be reused, cleaned up and recycled. In the end, they'll use less water than if they once through and throw it away. For some of the facilities, they have large landscaped areas where they can tighten their belts and look at more efficient ways to keep their sites tidy and looking good.
So similar to how residential homeowners can xeriscape their yards, get rid of their lawn, water at night, water when it's colder, that sort of thing? Yeah,
exactly that sort of thing. And so there's a propensity to overwater. Even though our watershed is a semi-arid area, it's really easy for folks to apply more than is necessary, and that it goes to any irrigation application. But the turf in particular only needs about an inch or 2.5 centimeters a week. So if they're applying a lot more than that, then it's going to waste or it's running off. There are drought tolerant plants and different strategies that would use considerably less water.
So Doug, can you tell us a bit about wastewater processing in agri-food?
Every different processor has different challenges, but generally there's, food processing creates some pretty high strength wastewater that needs to be dealt with before it can be released into the environment. In some cases, the facility will treat the wastewater themselves. So for the facilities within the city, they discharge into the city sewer system and shows up at part of the mix at the wastewater plant. The challenges are there's high COD, high oxygen
OWC
demand
Eats,
that
the
has
web
to be
series where
addressed
we talk
so
to the
that
people
it
making
doesn't
food in
impact
Southern
the
Alberta.
receiving body, the Oldman River. And there's also a lot of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus that come with it. Just inherent in the food products are high starches and in the, like I say, phosphorus and other nutrients that are in there for good reason, but when they end up in the wastewater, it has to be treated so that it doesn't impact the environment.
So how much of that is done by virtue of Mother Nature and how much of that is intervention?
We like to leverage Mother Nature when we're doing the intervention, and so there's a lot of biological treatment at the treatment plant. For the most part, natural organisms, bacteria and the like that are inherent in the wastewater, but we create an environment for them to thrive and do the work that we want them to do. Nitrogen and phosphorus removal is all done biologically with Mother Nature's help, but at a high intensity compared to what would naturally happen in the environment. For example, if that wastewater were just directly discharged into the river, some of those processes would naturally take place. But in the environment, at the lower rates and less of bacteria present to do the job, there's a lot of oxygen gets consumed, and that would impact the aquatic life in the river. In the wastewater plant, we're pumping lots of air into the processes to accommodate that biology, and if it happened out in the wild, it would consume all of the oxygen available in the water and to a disastrous effect.
Oh wow.
It is an intervention, but we leverage the natural, what's available to us naturally as much as possible.
So is that part of the secret to our wonderful tasting Lethbridge water?
Part of the secret for the tasting water is what we're starting with, and that's water from the Oldman River that comes from the snowpack and has lots of good minerals to add to the taste, and not a lot of pollution, because there's not millions of people or a lot of industry in the watershed. The water starts out really quite good. When we treat it for drinking, we remove all the particles and may have disease-causing organisms attached to them and other things, and we clean that up, and the disinfection process that we apply is ultraviolet light. So when we're dealing with nasties like Giardia and Cryptosporidium, we accomplish that with UV disinfection, and that process imparts no change to the actual water itself, so it doesn't add to the taste, which is a good thing. And so we do use chlorine in limited amounts to address target organisms like viruses, polio and hepatitis, and all kinds of other simpler organisms that are not addressed with the UV light because they're genetically deficient. They don't have DNA, so that you can't attack their DNA to do the job. And so we do use chlorine, a limited amount of chlorine, and then before it leaves the plant, we combine it with ammonia to form chloramine, and that gives us a couple things. One is that it lasts a long time in the pipes, so it does a good job if there's other contamination when it's being delivered to your home or your business or the food processing plant, but it also has, a very, tame flavor profile as well. So you don't get that swimming pool flavor that some communities get. Some cities don't use that technique.
So I've heard the kind of Lethbridge, Picture Butte, Tabor area referred to as the premier food corridor, and I know there's promotions to get more agri-food processors locating here. So it sounds like from what we learned today, a big part of that is because they can rely on Lethbridge for really good treated water for the processing, and then also for treating their wastewater afterwards. So that's like one of the reasons they're locating here, is they know they can have this safe access for healthy food.
Yeah, it's the availability of high quality drinking water and someone to shoulder the burden of wastewater treatment is a plus for those businesses for sure. The city of Lethbridge has, a very friendly, supportive attitude in the context of water and wastewater. The pricing for high volumes of water, of potable water, is quite favorable, and we are pretty relaxed and cooperative when it comes to dealing with wastewater. For a price, we'll take high strength wastewater that other communities will force industry to pre-treat to a level that looks and feels a lot like domestic wastewater, so that it's their job's easier. And Lethbridge has decades of history where we will accept high strength wastewater where others don't.
So most food processors nowadays probably would prefer to locate in a city like Lethbridge rather than kind of build their own treatment facilities.
Given the choice, I believe that they would prefer to be able to focus on their core job. If they're doing it themselves, then they've got the food product to make, and then they've also has to have people with the expertise to treat the wastewater. And treating the wastewater is really, it's necessary, but it's really a secondary job to them. And so their preference would be to just focus on the job at hand and have someone else take care of the secondary bit.